In this video, we take a look at how you might use the skills of abstraction and decomposition that we introduced in topic 1 to help you solve problems during the paper 2 on-screen exam. So let's just start with a quick recap. Abstraction is the process of removing unnecessary details and including only the relevant details. It's a method of computational thinking that focuses on what is important in problem solving. Decomposition is the process of breaking down a complex problem into smaller, more manageable parts. Dealing with many different stages of a problem at once is much more difficult than breaking a problem down into a number of smaller problems and solving each of those one at a time. Okay, so let's look at a real scenario of a problem that we're going to be asked to write in Python and look at how we can apply the skills of abstraction and decomposition. So the problem says, write a program which calculates someone's wage and outputs a wage slip to the screen. It should ask the user how many hours they've worked this week and their hourly rate of pay. It should then calculate their gross pay, which is made up of their standard wage plus any overtime. Overtime is 1.5 the rate and any hours in excess of 37. It should also calculate any deductions, which is made up of income tax at a rate of 20% and national insurance at a rate of 8%. So we're going to start with abstraction. Ask yourself the questions, what is important and what must be included in our problem solution? What can be ignored? Don't go adding any extra requirements that aren't in the scenario or the question. The great trick here is actually to get out a highlighter or a pen in the exam and underline the different bits that you need to work on. So we can see here, our program is going to have to ask the user the number of hours they've worked this week. It's going to have to ask the user for their hourly rate of pay. Each of these are individual requirements which will end up being turned into code in Python. So we're going to pull them out and list them. We need to calculate their standard pay. We need to calculate their overtime pay. And of course, we need to sum together these two calculations to get their gross amount of pay. We need to calculate the amount deducted for income tax and national insurance. And then again, sum together these two values, so we've got a total for the amount of deductions. We then need to calculate their net pay, which of course will be our gross pay minus all our deductions. And finally, we've been told to output the wage slip to the screen, so we need to make sure we do that as well in our program. So that's abstraction taken care of. We've worked out everything our program is going to need to do, and we've listed each of those requirements, so to speak, and we've put those there on the right in our bulleted list. Now let's turn to decomposition. It might be tempting just to put pen straight to paper or fingers to keyboard and to start programming away. But an excellent skill is to look at the problem and break it down. So ask the questions, can this problem be broken down into smaller subproblems? What actions and tasks should be carried out in each separate part of the program? So we started off here with a box that says weekly wages program, and we're going to see how we can break that down in a logical way. Well, there's definitely a part of the program here where we need to get the initial input from the user, ask the number of hours and ask them for rate of pay. And you can see how we've pulled those requirements for the abstraction and broken them down into our decomposition structure diagram. We're going to need to calculate their gross pay, and that's going to be made up of calculating the normal wages and the overtime, the results of which will be passed back to calculate gross pay to work out the total. In a similar fashion, we can break down the program to calculate the tax, the national insurance, and sum those two values together to get the total deductions. A part of our program will have to calculate the net pay. And obviously we're going to have to output the wage slip. Now it should be noticed this isn't necessarily the only way you could break down this problem. There are often many different valid solutions and ways you can tackle and break down a problem using decomposition, but this would certainly be a valid way of approaching it. Now that you've done that, you can start tackling the program in bits and pieces. You can take one section of this structure diagram and tackle that in isolation from the others. So we could, for example, start with getting the initial input from the user, which consists of asking them for the hours worked and asking them for the rate of pay. And you can see we've done that in a couple of lines of Python there. We're asking a couple of inputs, converting the answer into a float, and then storing those in two variables. So now let's tackle gross pay. Now, one potential way of tackling this, and there are of course others, is to make calculate gross pay its own subroutine, in this case a function. So that's what I've chosen to do below in Python. I've created a function, def calculate underscore gross underscore pay. It takes in two parameters, hours and rate. And of course they're the variables we just gathered from the user in the previous part of the program. I then ask if the value of hours that's been passed in is less than or equal to 37, and if it is, I do a standard calculation and return the gross pay. If it's over 37, I have to do something a little bit different, because I also have to calculate the extra hours at the overtime rate, and again, I then return. You could carry on like this in a structured way, tackling each part of the problem from the structure diagram until the entire program has been written in Python. And it provides you with some reassurance that you're writing the program in a structured and coherent manner.